So thank you, Andrew, to get the ball rolling. And I hope that after this talk, we will all love the world a bit better. We are presenting a talk in the frame of the European Creative Project Walking Arts and Local Communities, for which we have an online course running that has now a module going on, walking as a critical spatial practice. This conversation today is about how we can walk and transform our environment in the relation to Spaziergangswissenschaft, about which Simona, Johannes, and Violeta will enlighten us in a moment. First of all, I would like to give the stage to Simona, who will be our host for tonight. She will introduce and facilitate a conversation afterwards with Johannes Hedinger and Violeta Burckhardt. I want to invite you. This talk conversation is open for everyone, but also the online course, which is zooming in on walking, and in the coming module, which will start in June, on the future of walking arts, there are still places available to join the Saturday sessions and the workshops that will follow these. You're much invited to check it out and to get more of these talks and ideas that we want to share with you. Thank you, Johannes and Violeta, for being with us. Simona, I will let you take over and be in your good hands for the rest of the evening.
Thank you, Hirt. Good evening, everyone, and welcome. Tonight, we are happy to welcome two guests connected to the legacy of Lucius Burckhardt and to the field of Spaziergangswissenschaft, often translated as promenadology or astrology. Developed by Lucius and Annemarie Burckhardt, I included also his wife, Spaziergangswissenschaft proposes walking as a way of thinking and perceiving the world. And it is based on the idea that landscape is not something objective that exists out there, but something we continuously construct through movement, memory, culture, attention, and experience. Our first guest this evening is Violeta Burckhardt and also Johannes. And I will start with Violeta because she's a woman. She's an architect and a landscape architect with an international background. She studied in Mexico City, Berlin, University from Shanghai, and she worked with renewed practices including Raum Labor Berlin and Vogt landscape architect in Zurich and Berlin. Alongside her architectural practice, she is also active in artistic and curatorial context, including as co-curator of migrating landscapes at the Venice Architecture Biennale, as well as through her own projects presented at the Neue Nationale Gallery in Berlin. I will talk a little bit about, I will present also Johannes. Johannes with together the practice the same discipline like Violeta, and together they developed many work practices through architecture research, education, and curation. Many of the practices deal with the ecological transformation, and he has an experience as a professor and curator in Switzerland. But I will let him to introduce himself, and we'll discuss after his presentation together with you many ideas connected with Lucius Burckhardt and the artistic practices of both of our invite guests.
And Violeta will start actually because she's a woman. She's first.
Yeah. Okay,
And
I didn't see her. That's why I didn't see her.
And we decided that she gives first a short introduction towards her practice, about 5 to 7 minutes or so. And then I will do the same for my institute. And then we dive into Lucius Burckhardt and the promenadology or the strolology. And then we talk about our walking projects, the last from last year and the two events we plan for this year. And we invite all of you then to join in some way. And then hopefully we have a discussion in the end. So that would be the plan if this is okay.
Perfect.
Okay, so Violeta, I can't see you, but you just say next slide.
Yeah. Okay, so I will start. Who are we? Next slide. Studio ERDE is a collaborative practice, and we're based in Berlin and Zurich, and we're interested in new ways of looking at landscape embedded in our current time in the Anthropocene, and trying to look through them through a very planetary but site-specific lens. And we operate at the intersection between landscape architecture, ecology, art, and urban design. The scale of our projects go from very small interventions, even installations, sculptures, to large-scale planning. We are currently working on building a small city of 3,000 people in the Rheinische Revier in Germany, on top of an old mining hole. So that's so we try to do a little bit the zoom in and zoom out all of the time. Next slide. So we are a critical and explorative practice. So for us, our practice is intrinsically connected to different communication strategies. So whether it be curation, performance, teaching, traveling, or writing, we're constantly on looking for ways of how to understand the built environment and how to represent it in different ways. Next slide. For us, walking is a kind of exposure to process. So, and it's something that guides us as a leading methodology for the research, for the understanding, and since we basically work with public space, walking and how people walk is part of our main research. Next slide. So landscape in the Anthropocene, or how we understand it, is no longer about stable backgrounds. So they're more like dynamic assemblages shaped by extraction, climate change, infrastructural decay, migration of species, and altered hydrological cycles. So basically, it's a changing, moving ground which pushes us to move, no? And walking reveals these gradual and uneven transformations because it unfolds in time, but also on a bodily scale. So through this, we kind of, through walking, we start to notice changing soil conditions, literally the cracks on the pavement, small traces, new vegetation, spontaneous vegetation suddenly coming into places where it wasn't before, sounds, smells, residues of industry, etc. These are invisible in conventional representations, and that's why we use walking as a way of discovering them. Next slide. For us, it's also a lot about the lines that somehow once delineated space. So these edges, these borders, these boundaries are now unable to contain the entangled networks that constitute the built environment. And as the dichotomies of inside and outside, landscape and architecture begin to dissolve, what emerges is more of a hybrid, more like a threshold, an in-between space of dynamic interrelations. Walking becomes a way of understanding and exploring these relations. And this is not land as we know it, nor is it mapped by established ontology. So it escapes the territorial definitions of the modern project, becoming instead an evolving ecology, a living site of negotiation and distributed agency between the wild, the designed, the organic, and the technological, the spontaneous and the engineered. It is a space of flux, and it must be experienced in flux. Next slide. We can see this in this walking that we're interested in, this walking and this movement, not only as a human endeavor but as an ecological one. So we see how the Baumgrenze, the tree line is shifting, and we see how vegetation, trees begin to march up the mountain. Things are on the move, and they're changing the terrain. They're changing also our idea of landscape and how we view it and how we experience it with it. Next slide. There are also different things that are somehow happening within this Anthropocene network. It is a space of losing control through unwanted experiments, mistakes, or errors. So it's not just human-centered, but it's about acknowledging that it never really was under control, and about migrations of people, of plants, of ideas. And this is an example of Chernobyl, where as the reactor exploded, and there was a sort of this zone defined where humans could not enter, that allowed a new kind of wilderness to emerge as a new species began to take over the land that humans would not touch. So there is a sort of there's this movement happening in both directions. Next slide. We're also living through a time of accelerated change, of changing weather conditions, which in turn also create different territorial situations, and these paths are somehow then interrupted by these new events, like the one, the Bergsturz, when the mountain fell in Brienz. That wasn't too long ago, in 2025, and it's kind of interesting because here you see how like the path is somehow stopped, no, by the new mountain, but the mountain also in itself creates a new path. So it's this constant dialogue of different situations. Next slide. This is, we believe in a new way of understanding the Arcadian or pastoral state, which is also somehow has to do with understanding landscape through another way, of understanding landscape as a voyage, as circumambulating, as going into the landscape, but also posing other questions of what is then the landscape. And I think this is something that we will talk about later when looking at Lucius Burckhardt's work. It's really trying to somehow go away from this image, this romantic idea of nature, by using walking as a methodology that traverses the ideal with the industrial and the urban with nature. Next slide. And so for us as landscape architects, this is very important because we create spaces, but the spaces also create themselves. And we place a path with a particular idea of how people should move for leisure reasons, but also for security reasons. But in the end, there's always the path on top of that one, which actually signals and tells the story of the terrain and of the space and what it wants to tell. Often they are going in the complete different directions. Next slide. And for us, it is a lot about movement and movement as a force of survival. And this is, for example, an example of a new kind of ecology which was created in Ascension Island. It is located more or less in the middle of pretty much in the middle of the Atlantic, and close to St. Helen, where Napoleon was once brought as a prisoner. And in 1836, Charles Darwin visited Ascension Island, and as he was going on his voyage towards South America on the Beagle, and he noticed this mountain. It is a volcanic mountain, and told his buddy Hooker, who was back then the director of the Kew Gardens, that he had found a place where one could maybe experiment and with new ecologies. And they shipped a boat from the Kew Gardens with a large array of different species and started to plant them on top of the highest peak. Later on, with time, some of this vegetation started to flourish, and because of its geographical location of the island, the small plants that were on top of this mountain started to somehow stop the clouds from just passing over, and so the clouds began to hover on the top of the mountain, and so nebel, a fog, like a fog forest was created, and it changed the ecology forever. And so we're interested in this movement. One you can put the next one, Johannes. We're interested in this movement and the things that it actually sparks, and often with every movement there's we carry not only ideas, perceptions, but we also carry small things along the path, sometimes beneath our shoes in the form of small seeds. So it's also somehow a way of exchange, a way of communication that happens in a soft form. Next slide. And this is just another example. You mentioned the project that I did, Migrating Landscapes. Out of that project evolved another project which was called Growing Expectations, and it's again about movement of plants. as part of the discourse. And we were looking, it was for the Venice Biennale, and we were looking a little bit about the situation of the lagoon. Next slide. And you can see on the left picture, and everyone knows this, this sort of como vegetation that is beginning to flourish between the cracks, and it's a sort of symbiosis between architecture and landscape, almost like an architecture that is slowly coming back to its original state as landscape. And a vegetation that becomes architecture. And so we made a small model of that, and made of bricks, made of earth stemming from different parts of Europe, and planted in the middle of this structure. Next slide. Plants which were brought to the lagoon and which have established themselves and contributed to a new diversification of the lagoon's ecology. So these are all wandering plants. No, these are all moving vegetations, and because the blocks were not burned, and the Biennale takes 6 months, and with time and through erosion, through sun exposure, wind, and rain, these blocks began to erode, and the vegetation began to expand. The idea was that as the vegetation expanded, it also, through its rooting system, would kind of provide a biological structure to these bricks, to this landscape. And it worked very well, but in the end, it was a show, and there was no plan of what to do afterwards. And it was again the question of what will happen to these plants. And the project was called Migrating Landscape, so it was kind of very strange to just throw them away. Next slide. So this is how it ended, and then the idea, what I did was just remove all the plants, and I looked for another place where to keep them. Next slide. Found an island, La Isola San Servolo, that would accommodate them, and then with the help of students and volunteers, we managed to bring all the rest of the plants, and with rest material, construct a very small but beautiful new space for them. Next slide. And exactly, so this is us building it. And next slide. And this is when we were putting it together, we basically just created a receptacle, and because it's made of clay, then the clay would absorb the water, and it would ensure that the plants would survive even without any maintenance. And then the last time I went there, next slide, you can already see, oh yeah, it's a video, but you can go to the next slide. You can go to the next slide, Johannes. Yeah, and so now you see how this structure is starting to fall apart, and as it's falling apart, it's somehow going back to its original state of landscape. And I just wanted to show this small example because it's a little bit about walking, but not just walking as a methodology for understanding the landscape, but also the walking that landscapes do. Next slide. And this is an excursion that we did on the place where we're supposed to build this small town / city of 3,000 people. And these are spaces that are so vast, which can only be understood through walking. Next slide. And just as a conclusion, walking is not just something that we do as research or as like a previous part of the projects, but it's also something that we organize afterwards. This is a walk that we did on a project that is in process in Berlin in Haus der Statistik, and we are constantly offering walks as a way of people not just to understanding what we're doing, but also to making them part of the process. And it's very interesting because then according to what you see that people are seeing, you start to understand and frame the space differently. So yes, this was just a very short introduction of my practice, and now the floor is yours, Johannes.
Thank you. Maybe just a quick word to my background. So I have an artistic background, and I'm also a trained art historian. I worked for 25 years as an artist and did 150 shows and went to 7 or 8 biennales, also the Venice Biennale. But the last 10 years, I mostly work as a curator and as a cultural manager. I established this Biennale for 10 years in the Safental. I will show you some samples. And I teach also since 20 years, and I do also research. So I have many hats, and this more or less comes all together in the ILEA, Institute for Land and Environmental Art. And I give you a 5-minute presentation what the ILEA was and what it can or might become. And walking is a big part of this transition to a new phase of ILEA. And after that, we dive in the promenadology and Lucius Burckhardt and the walking. Okay, so what is ILEA? It's art and research and education in the field of art and ecology. It exists since 2016. The first 8-10 years, it was mostly in Safental. It's a super rural area. I see on pictures of that. So it's very remote, very, I would say, strukturarm. So very remote. There are much more cows and animals than humans there. And in 2014 and 15, we had the idea to start there an international summer school and went to the municipality, and they said, yeah, let's do it. So we look for volunteers, but they also said they want to have something for their inhabitants and the very few tourists they have. So we come up also with an open air exhibition, which we call later then a Biennale and an Art Safental. So these two things were developed together, and it was a grassroots movement, a private initiative who became then more and more an institution over the years. So when you go to the website, so you see it's ILEA as a think and do tank. More and more, it's about socio-ecological transformation through art and culture projects. And we have different platforms such as exhibition, education projects, research programs, talks, symposia, and residencies, and also publications. It's a non-profit organization. Now it's 2 non-profit organizations. So we split it 2 years ago. The Biennale is now an own entity, and the institute moved on, and now it's based in Zurich. It has an international advisory board, and you find more on the website as well. So why ILEA exists? So we can say it's environmental questions need more than technical answers. So that's why we look for other ways to approach and to answer or to approach those questions. And art can be a new form of perception and cooperation. And very much we think places are not the background, so they shape the work. So it's placemaking, it's very site-specific what we do, and research becomes more and more and stronger. So we started with projects which were more or less classical sculptural projects in the green space, not in the white space, and more and more also process-oriented and research-oriented parts and form become the key and the main points of our intervention with nature, with the landscape, with the people there, and also with more than human partnerships. So the first 8-9 years we were based in Safenthal. That's the top picture in winter. So it's super wintry there. And now since 2025, we have the headquarters in Zurich and in Zurich-Oerlikon and also in the MFO. So it's in a post-industrial area. Yeah, you can say we went from the alpine feeling to a wider terrain. So it's not only we moved from the rural to the city. We moved also to a lot of international cooperation and activities. And we have this network. So we now conclude a project with partners in Pakistan, in India, and in Bangladesh. About the topic is river landscape. So we moved out of the pristine alpine valley and discovered the world. The two early pillars, I will show you a few photos, which leads also to the walking project we did last year in Safenthal as well, and now this year in Basel and Zurich. I will show you 5 slides from the Art Safenthal, the Biennale, and the Academy. And these formats were very much connected to the valley and to the landscape, to the public field. So Art Safenthal existed from 16 to 24. It was mostly outdoor everything, so it's an exhibition run 4 months, day and night. We made 5 editions. We produced about over 50 artworks by around 100 artists. So landscape was not only the stage, but somehow it was the space. And the work were first placed and then later in collaboration with the places and the partner entities like mountains, villages, rivers, paths, infrastructures. They become partners of those works and the artists who develop those works. Yes, and there was an audience, and audience had to walk a lot. So they weren't placed directly next to the post-auto station. So sometimes you had to walk over 2 hours to see a work, and you had to earn the experience of the work. And sometimes the way or the path was as important than maybe in the end the work, and vice versa. And it's about seeing, experience, walking, listening, and so on. Just a few slides from the first year. So we came from the traditional land art and then moved more and more to more experimental formats. So that's one slide, one work from the very first year by Les Frères Chapuisat. That's from the second edition in 2018. So we started to have a topic or like a subject, a word, horizontal, vertical, so landscape, read through orientation, gravity, distance, views, a dialogue between alpine scales and also the artistic intervention and gestures. That's from the third edition, the Corona edition. So finally, we came up with the title and the topic before Corona hits the world, but analog digital. So it was one of the very few exhibitions who could take place during that summer, also because it was outside. So digital system entered the alpine landscapes, and sensors, drones, augmented reality, virtual reality, observation became artistic material, and technology was part also was treated as part of the environment. And that's from the fourth edition. So we moved to what we can learn from the Earth. So that was the topic. So soil, plants, materials, and the UN agency became partner. And the way we listen to the modern human world. Again, a lot of walking. This was on a path. So again, you had to walk to see that work by Julius von Bismarck. You had to walk for another roughly 2 hours to see it. And the last edition so far, the final Biennale we did in 2024, was even more a processual. We did a lot of performances, again, a lot of walking. So this image shows Ernesto Neto. So that was a performance. Who took it was a walking performance. And the topic was what if, songs from Tomorrowland. So speculative and future-oriented questions were raised. And you can say art as a rehearsal for possible futures. Yeah, that was the Biennale the last 10 years. And then parallelly, also connected sometimes with the same artists and educators, we run a summer school. This was an educational laboratory in the mountains, and it brought together artists, researchers, and students. And we had 4 academies, over 100 participants, 45 faculty members. And we did also 3 symposia with over 50 speakers. And there were a lot of collaboration with the locals. This was a food workshop with a local chef. And parallelly, we had also the ILEA schools with art schools, mostly then in the cities with ZHDK, the Zurich Art University, also with Köln. And we started with land and environmental topics, moved on to more public sphere. And now we have new formats this year, art and sustainable future. And together also with Violeta, we have this summer another course in urban commons and placemaking. And you can still enroll if you're interested. So a key part of ILEA's teaching is to ask how art can act in public sphere or public space. And this includes not only intervention, but also temporary acts and the change of perception. And again, walking in public sphere is part of this method. And public space as a field of action. Again, some bullet points. So streets, villages, valleys, neighborhoods become research sites. So again, site specificity. Another branch or leg of the department of ILEA is the research. So we have the art and the exhibition, we have the schools and the educational part, and research. Sometimes they overlapping, of course, and we show project from the research, then the exhibition, vice versa. We did several projects, also long-term, long-durational projects with ETH, with HKB and other institutions. So it's also a collaboration and transdisciplinary collaboration, artistic research and environmental sensing. Could be soundscape studies, oral history, and so on and so on. And a mix also of artistic and scientific research methods. just two examples, run since 2021. It's oral, this is an how you call it? I don't know the word in English, but it's a research project by Marcus Maeder, and it's a observatory ecological audio processes through sound. You can listen in the forest and in the soil, in the ground, and he mixes artistic and sonic and music methods together with science, hard science. And the other was a project I just tip in is Safinthaler Gesprächen. So that's talks with an oral history project with over 50 conversations we did with the locals, but also with the people who came to the valley, the artist, researcher. And it shows also, it addresses also landscape can be made from stories, memories, and conflicts, experiences, and so on. Another thing is the residency. We did quite extensively between 2018 until 2024 or 5, mostly in cooperation with Boefecia, which is the Culture Foundation of Switzerland. So they bring in foreign or artist and researcher and vice versa for a residency, a research, a field work, and we connected them with the locals and with hosted them there. And sometimes they developed also then a work for the Biennale or wrote the text for the catalog and so on. We do a lot of talks and discourse, and so ILEA was well known first for the exhibition, but more and more we go towards discourse. And that leads then also to research and publications. And now we plan more formats like the walking symposium we talk in a bit, and also other formats. And then last but not least, we have the ILEA Press in cooperation with the Wechsler Verlag. So far we published 4 books, 2 together with the Biennales, but others, landscapes, mass movements, so all related in this field, art and ecology and environment. We do a little bit of consulting, like public art, public space, research, transformation, and so on. So ILEA was and is, as you see, that's a summary: exhibition, residency, school, research, talk, press, consulting. And more we now develop the yellow part, so we go more and more towards experimentation, cooperation, facilitation, and discourse. Okay, so that was ILEA. So we have a few slides about promenadology. On one hand, I think a lot of people know already about it, but maybe as a short reminder, we have. So this is Lucius, and Promenadologie in German, Spaziergangswissenschaften. I would say it's a method, yes, and it takes walking really serious, and not as a leisure and not as a romantic stroll, but as a method for perceiving space, landscape, city, society maybe, and society differently. And Lucius Burckhardt was the one who developed this approach in the 70s already and onwards. And he asked, what do we see when we see landscape? And what do we fail to see? So his central argument was that we do not simply see landscape. We see expectations, we see images, narratives, planning, decisions, and cultural frames. So promenadology, therefore, does not only study a place, it also studies the perception of a place.
And maybe
Yeah, add something?
just really quick, just as a background, he was a Swiss sociologist, economist, and a planning theorist that had a lot of resonance afterwards within planning and design and architectural circles. Not just for his ideas. I'm not sure if you guys know his books, but the books are actually very fun to read. They're simple but sharp, and somehow what was also a very important part of his life was the educational part, no? So many people, he's not just known as an amazing thinker, writer, and walker, but also as a teacher.
Yes. And as a husband, because we have to talk also about Annemarie. Mostly on the books is his names, but Annemarie, his wife, was always with him. So she did all the writings. She wrote basically some parts with him, and
she was an intellectual collaborator, no? And also they developed these ideas together, and they also would go together always. And she was also trained as an educator and was deeply interested in this sort of more pedagogical and perception part, more linked with questions of everyday experience and learning processes and social behavior. And because of this more experimental social behavior part, which she brought, and many of these walks were then organized as more like group experiments, and many say this is more has more to do with her influence. In any case, we began by saying Lucius Burckhardt, and quickly realized that actually we should just talk about both of them, no? And yeah.
And one of the topics, you mentioned a lot of topics, but next or beside all these environmental topics, planning and how planning shapes the position, that was also a main issue and topic of his thinking, of their thinking and writing. So they criticized also the form of, at that time, the planning that often creates problem before it tries to solve them. So he showed also that cities and landscapes are not only technical matters. So there are cultural and political constructs, and he was very much thinking also on that kind of topics. And again, there he used his city walks, mostly city walks, then also to perceive or study those problems or these planning problems and to reflect on them. So we asked also ourselves what they changed. So I think the Burckhardt opened up a different way of thinking about space. They did not only ask how can we plan better. So that was actually also a book title of him. So they ask also, why do we see things the way we see, as I mentioned? So who decides what counts, for example, as beautiful, as useful, as natural or disturbing? And at the time, this was an important shift in the perspective. And every 10 or 15 years, this approach is rediscovered, and I think that's the second or the third generation now who rediscover the writing and thinking of Lucius and Anne-Marie Burckhardt. So phenomenology turned the body, the movement, the slowness, and the direct experience into a tool also for thoughts. That's why we also say our title of the conference in a minute.
And
So
maybe
yeah.
just really quickly about this particular image. It's called the 0 meter walk, and it was done together with French artist Paul Armand Guette, and it took place in Bergpark Wilhelmshöhe, which is an 18th century sort of landscape garden, and they did this together, and they had these t-shirts. It was just it functioned a little bit ironically, and it was about markers and how these markers also define what I was saying before, like which for my practice is important, like where does something end and another begin, and what happens when this marker is in movement. So it's a little bit about observing frame views and questioning conventions of aesthetics based on choreographed perception of these places.
Yes, and this photo was taken at Forcapas in
it was
2,400
Forcapas.
meters. Yeah, this is Forcapas.
Yeah.
That's the folk art project from the 80s and 90s. But I think that the French collaborator did this project in different places. But this very photo is on Forcapas. You see the Forcapasstraße there.
Which is really interesting because, you know, it's also a place where one canton begins and another canton ends. It's a highly militarized space, and so it's a place where many edges sort of come together.
And it's only open for it's a high pass. The pass road is only open for 4 months in the year, and on this Gipfel hotel, they did our project in the 80s, so which was groundbreaking at the time, and of course they didn't succeed. But now that it's supposed to be an avant-garde project, so, and it's reverenced a lot. Okay, let's move on. You mentioned the book, so we have 3 covers here of these writings, and the Martin Schmitz Verlag, so they bring out more of his writings. So do you want to add something to the books?
No, I mean, it's maybe just to translate, the kleinstmögliche Eingriff is something that, for example, it means the smallest intervention or possible. And it's something that, for example, today is very in vogue in architectural discourse. Is about how it's now we see a shift of going away from these sort of huge, massive projects that try to fix everything, but it's more about like what very small things can be done in order to create a change, no? And the other book, which is very important and we need to always consider, is Wer plant die Planung? So who plans the planning? Is also important because he was highly political, and his walks became a very sort of soft, inviting, but collective way of protest also for many.
On one hand, it was a performance and field research, but then also critical practice. Yes. And this again leads then to our walking project. And then you brought some slides, this one. So maybe you want to.
Yeah, I just thought it's always good to show some examples of what he done. So this is called Die Fahrt nach Tahiti, or the Journey to Tahiti, which is probably Lucius Burckhardt's most famous and foundational walk experiment, and also often described as Ur-Spaziergang, or the original walk. But basically, the basic idea was in 1987, he and his students made a walk through this landscape in a Dönche, was a former military training ground around Kassel where he taught. And during the walk, he would read excerpts from the diary of Georg Foster, who was accompanied James Cook on the 18th century voyage to Tahiti. So it was kind of like this very strange but brilliant twist, because the participants were somehow experiencing the ordinary, one could argue almost damaged landscape of outside of Kassel, but through the narration, they were mentally transported to this paradise, and also, and I say it like this because also the idea of paradise, of the exotic, of the sort of the wild, which is central for sort of our understanding of landscape even today, was very much also very subjective at that time. So what was he testing? The walk basically explored the central question of, like, is landscape something that we see or something that we construct culturally? And he wanted to demonstrate that landscapes are not objective, will never be. Perception is conditioned by language. Language is also conditioned by history, by expectation, by politics, and resources, and that beauty is culturally produced. So the idea that a waistline, a military waistline, could become a natural reserve, a space of wonder, and this all depending on movement and language, no? So this is like one of them. This is another one, and it's very interesting. And this is also the reason why we decided to begin in the mountain, in a pristine landscape. Also, many would call sort of wild nature, which it is not. It is extremely constructed, culturally produced. Again, this idea. But then he did these other experiments in the city. This performance was called Das Zebrastreifen, or petting the zebra, because it's like the zebra stripes. It's also like that in German. So it was about somehow this like como connection to the zebra through the animal, caressing as a way of politically sort of como affecting urban space. And what they did is that they had this teppich, this carpet rolled, and they would go around the city. This was in 1993. It was a 30-meter long zebra crossing stripe thing, and whenever the group wanted to cross the street, they would just roll out the striped carpet and cross together. So the action was funny, was humorous, but it was also deeply political, and it criticized car-oriented urban planning, but it also was a way of reclaiming the city for pedestrians, and sort of como questioning of again these marks, this signalétic, as a way of somehow also controlling movement and human behavior within largely urbanized areas. So the action embodied Burckhardt's central thesis of, like, planning is invisible. So he believed that cities are not neutral, and that they are shaped by these hidden systems and habits and power structures. And um, and it was and I think it shows very well how it was a protest, but it was a pedagogical exercise. It was an urban experiment, but also a collective choreography done by reinterpreting rules and language also, no?
And the last one?
And which is a nice connection to the last one. And these are the first one and this one are the pictures that we took for our posters for our symposiums in Zurich and Basel. This was the Autoscheibenspaziergang or Windschutzscheibenspaziergang or windshield walk. And also very interesting. It was about participants walking through the city with these large planes or frames in front of themselves, somehow simulating the car windshield. And sometimes they would even walk next to to real windshields, so next to cars. This device somehow mediating their relationship with what they had in front, but also somehow framing it. It was about understanding, behaving like cars in order to understand cars, and but also occupying space differently, like how understanding to question somehow the rules of who is allowed to go on the street, and the windshield also, of course, as a way of talking about the way that cities are built for cars today. And it also demonstrated that mobility technologies do not only change speed, but they change perception. I mean, we know this from the introduction of the train and its repercussions in representations of landscape and in art. But Burckhardt basically argued that the windshield fundamentally reorganizes how we experience landscape and the city, and it creates awareness to this sort of new form of experience.
And this frame maybe brings you to this last image you choose, the framing of the
and
world.
this is also something interesting. This is not with walking, but since we're talking about him and his work, these are his aquarelles, and they were very small, but and often humorous. But it's exactly this. No, he was painting the painting, and of the subject of the painting all in one lens. And I think it says a lot about how he understood, or how interested he was in this sort of double, triple representations about how subjective this was. And for him also this relationship between the idyll, this sort of paradise, Arcadian, pastoral image of landscape, and how it could actually function otherwise in a different environments. Yeah. So they were not landscape paintings in a romantic sense, but it was more like conceptual sketches and visual essays and about perception of landscape. Yeah.
Yes, I'm just looking at the clock, and I think we should find a way to the walking symposium we currently do, and with a flashback or with a look back what we did last year, and then invite you guys to join there. And hopefully we have still a few minutes then to discuss. So the Lucius Burckhardt and his writing and thinking, and Anne-Marie as well, is sort of the ramp and the connection between my practice and Violeta's practice, and what we started last year. First in Safienthal again, and now this year in Zurich and in Basel. So we say walking, thinking in motion. And what we think of that is also that, as mentioned before, that walking is not a conventional format. Also here, so that's the poster you see behind also, again, the Tahiti work of Lucius. So what we did is we moved the lecture outside the lecture room or the knowledge production. So we went into space, into landscape, into neighborhoods, transit zones. And we asked again, what do we see when we walk? And what do we overlook when we only plan and measure or represent? And how thinking can change when the body and the place and the movement become part of the research. So those questions we, together with all these people from different backgrounds, this is also important. We had people from the art fields, from the planning, urban planning, from landscape architecture. This year we have also people from dance, from literature. So this transdisciplinary approach and thinking and mixing the bubbles is super important. And it's super important also that we don't do a walking conference and sit then the whole time. So we are mostly are in movement. So just a few slides how it was last year, and then a promotional for this year's event. 2.5 days, 11 workshops, walkshops we call them, 11 talks, 25 speaker, presenter, and 30 participants. Just a few slides to get an impression how that was. So we walked through a dark tunnel, for example. So we had lectures, performances in the field. The youngest participant was half a year. You see that? See her here? And we had food tastings, we had local handcrafts, we met with the local farmers, we had performances in the parking lot, we did research mappings, thinking, classical talks. That was Tim Ingold. And a lot of field, and space research. And that's kind of a summary I tried to do. So what became visible in this edition. So working works as an artistic practice, as a method of spatial perception, as a social and political reading of landscape. It produces a different kind of knowledge than lecture, for example. The place changed the discussion. The landscape is never neutral. So it was just a checkout. And it shapes, that perception shapes the expectation, as we mentioned before. And it connects, in our case, art research and experience. And there was a lot of interests. We couldn't, so we had more application that we could accommodate. So that's why we decided to do 2 more editions this year. One in Zurich in June already, in 2 weeks. You can still apply. So there are still a few spaces as listener open. And then one in September, 11 to 13 September in Basel. That's the 2 posters. You might recognize the photos from before. And you can find the application form on the ILEA website if you're interested in joining. What comes next? So we do a publication, again, an ILEA book of kind of an excerpt of these 3 walking symposiums in Tenna, in Safienthal, in Zurich, and in Basel. that's again kind of a summary what we think walking, why walking matters today. Again, the perception, the relation, spatial relation, the connection with the body and the thought and the place. That it opens knowledge to different people. So that what we have witnessed that in our last edition. Again, there are research planning and meditation, quasi combination. Yeah.
Maybe just to add really quickly,
Sure,
Johannes,
go.
that I think it was also very clear that walking is intergenerational, no?
Oh yes.
It became really clear that it's something that we can all do, and that can bring together people, and that walking is something that one often does together.
Thank you very much. If you are agree, we can open a space for discussions and for questions if you have some. Project that Violeta did together with you, I think, about vegetation and the boat with vegetation. I have suggestions about this walking of Iceland and geography. There is a book of José Saramago. I don't know if you know it. It's yeah, Violeta.
No, I don't know.
It's about the same idea of a walking island. Iberian Peninsula became an island, and the island,
José Saramago. Yeah, I don't know that book, but I know I've read other books from him.
That is very interesting. This idea to make a connection between not our human walk, but also the geographical walk of the landscape, and this transformation of geography in politics according to the position of the island once. In the direction of Africa, the other direction of America, the ex-colonies of Portugal and Spain, and in the last they go to in the direction of Antarctica, because this is of course fiction. This supposes also a demographical explosion of this island.
No, but this is not even fiction. This is really real, and we can see it now in the North Pole, and like and the Northwest Passage, no, for example, and which was completely covered in ice for a long time, sort of the origin of many tales and many myths. And now there's a problem because nobody knows in the north who owns the land, because the land was always stable, it was static. And now as it begins to melt, it begins to drift, and it becomes a bit complicated understanding where these points actually lie. And this sort of behavior has led to this crazy talks where it's about like where do we put the lines? Like, is it based on, like, is it 100 kilometers? Usually it's 100 kilometers, but is it from the coast? What if the coast is eroding? What if the coast is growing? No. So actually it's from the continental plate. But then where does the continental plate begin? Where does it start? And this has actually fueled incredible voyages underneath the sea, of all the territories that are at play in the north, and China, which is always there. And there's even this, I talk about it in a little book that I wrote, where there's even this, I think it was 2003, when the Russians went to the North Pole, or what they thought was the North Pole, based on all of these different sort of perceptions of where one thing ends and where one thing begins. And they planted with a submarine a little Russian flag in this point. So it's more real than you would think.
Because you are architects and you have very deep perception about space. I think you are very provoked now by this drifting space that of in a real meaning. And it's not just political perception, but now it's a geographical reality, which demands another political attitude. And
Yeah.
so probably no more borders. We have to let it open, this space.
Yes, sorry. I have a question for Johannes. Can you explain a bit more how it works with this second walk in September? How is organized, or was the planning in general, all the overall event that you organizing?
Like last year, so we did an open call for both editions in Zurich and in Basel. So I think a third or a few slots we directly invited not only theorists but also artists. But most of the presenter or the slots came in through the open call. And interestingly, this year, even more, let's say, practice-based, like workshops applied for. We try to have it a bit leveled, so it's about 50% or maybe 40% are more theoretical, like talks or classical talks. But the bigger part are workshops, and they are also much longer. So in the end, 2/3 of the time we will be actually walking or outside, mostly outside. Could be slow walks. We have food tastings. We have all similar what you saw from the slides from last year, but very different. A, it's an urban space, and B, it's amazing what you get of inputs when you put out an open course. We never thought of it. So really strong applications, and again, we couldn't accept all because it's only 2.5 days. So we should do another one, maybe in another country, in another life. It takes quite a few, it's quite some work to organize the whole thing. And still, it's kind of a cultural, a non-profit organization behind it. So not sure we did it as soon as possible next year, but we will see. But you guys are all invited to come, so there are still spots open. And in 1 week, we published the program, the final program of Zurich, also on the website. So for now, when you go there, you just see the names, but then later there will be even a short, kind of a short reader with title and abstracts, and you see more about the formats. And the talks we all stream, so you can join also that part. But the workshops we don't stream, so there will be a documentation yet. Do you want to add something, Violeta?
I think I'm good.
Okay.
So I think we can close if you don't have any question anymore, and we hope to see you soon in Switzerland.